He grew up working on a dairy farm in Cache County, graduated from USU, and then on to the Air Force Academy, where he graduated at the top of his class. He holds 3 speed records at the controls of a B-1B bomber, including the fastest nonstop flight around the world. He created and headed a consulting firm specializing in energy and environment, anti-terrorism, and corporate security, authored 16 books, including novels and historical books, and is currently serving as Utah's representative to the 2nd Congressional District. Today on the county seat, we will talk about energy, we will talk about monuments, grazing, and the outlook for southern and southwestern Utah. Welcome to the county seat today, Congressman. It's nice to have you here.
Pleasure. Thank you.
You are in kind of an interesting situation because it's not too often that a congressman serves alongside a congressman who is also his immediate predecessor in the same district.
Yeah.
That's a fairly infrequent occurrence.
It's a little unusual. When we decided to run, and by the way, I'm a non-traditional politician. It's not something I'd ever thought about doing, and we made the decision very quickly. And people ask, why did you decide to run? It's just I couldn't stand watching anymore. I had to get in the fight. But when we did, of course, being a Republican, we expected to be running against Jim Matheson, who lives in the 2nd District, but he decided to run in the 4th. So he and I serve side by side now. Good. See each other at the gym all the time.
Well, that's a very interesting thing. Now, the districts have been redesigned, too, because where Congressman Matheson used to represent big interests out in eastern Utah, the redistricting reshuffled the districts. So could you take a minute and maybe describe a little bit about the characteristics of the new 2nd Congressional District?
Well, I have to humbly say that I think the 2nd District is the jewel of the state. And I recognize that Utah's beautiful. I mean, I love Utah. And having spent my time in the military, living all over, I appreciate a lot of places, but there's something special about Utah. But there's really something kind of unique and special about the 2nd District. It's basically downtown Salt Lake City, roughly from Park City up to about Kaysville. And then it runs west and then all the way south to Washington County to St. George and then east over to the Colorado River. So you have very urban, the downtown parts of the city. You've got very, very rural in the central and southern part of the state. And you've got these magnificent national parks, and it's just what an honor to represent this district.
Well, looking at your past experience and the profile of the 2nd District, you came out of Cache County, worked on a dairy farm. Well, there's not a whole bunch I mean, there's a fair amount of grazing in this area, but also with your background in energy, and there's not a lot of energy in this area too. What kind of strengths do you think that are pairing with you and the 2nd Congressional District?
There are other places in the state that have more energy interests. For example, eastern Utah, the Uinta Basin is the most obvious example. But we do have energy interests in this district in addition to the oil and gas out east. I mean, for example, confined within the Grand Escalante National Monument, there's trillions of dollars worth of high value, high quality, very clean coal. And you're right, some of the grazing is done in other parts of the state. And if I could just make a quick comment on that. I grew up milking cows and dairying, which is a little different, but my wife grew up with her father was a rancher and still has that ranch, by the way. And I saw how important those leases were for ranchers. And it's the lifeblood for many of them. And no one has a greater incentive. No one is more interested in preserving that range land and preserving and taking care of the land than the ranchers who put their cows up there. No businessman wants to destroy his own business, and if they don't preserve that range land, then of course they come back the next year and there's no range for their cattle. So I think that I have a great faith in the American cattlemen and their ability and their desire to preserve those rangelands, working in conjunction with some federal agencies and some environmental groups as well. But no one wants to do that more than the ranchers themselves.
Well, it's often been said that the very best conservationists are the ranchers.
Exactly.
For that very reason.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that hits upon 2 very good topics for us, and I would like to explore them. Usually, I don't get an invitation to come back and talk about coal in Grand Staircase, and we don't get an opportunity to talk about loss of grazing permits. Yeah. But we are going to take that opportunity when we return with Congressman Stewart right here on the county seat. We'll be back right after this commercial break.
Check out these pictures from my vacation.
Where did you go again?
Garfield County, you know, like Bryce Canyon, Devil's Rock Garden,
Where's that?
Capitol Reef, Kodachrome Basin, Highway 12.
Wait a minute, I wanted to see more.
A picture may be worth 1,000 words, but there's nothing like experiencing the real thing firsthand. Gather your family and see the world's largest concentration of scenic attractions. Garfield County, Utah. Find the ultimate adventure. Let's be honest, you don't know much about Beaver County. Well, let me tell you about it. It's the birthplace of outlaw Butch Cassidy and inventor Philo T. Farnsworth. Some of the best skiing in Utah is at Eagle Point. You've got camping, Canyon Breeze Golf Course, Crusher and the Tushers, Beaver Territorial Courthouse, snowmobiling, renewable energy, Pioneer Car Show, Squeaky Cheese, Ghost Towns to explore, best water in the country, Paiute ATV trails, Old Frisco Kilns, horse racing, hunting, fishing, and it's a good place to live. Beaver County, mountains of fun. I could tell you more, but why don't you come and see it for yourself?
Carbon County is typically known for its industry and coal production. But did you know that Utah's Castle Country has something for everyone? The motocross track has been acclaimed as the most popular in Utah with a variety of technical and natural terrain, and even includes a pee-wee track. Visit castlecountry.com for more information.
Welcome back to the county seat. Our conversation today is with Chris Stewart, who is the representative from the 2nd Congressional District. And Congressman, you mentioned on the last go-around Grand Staircase and coal.
Yeah.
And the Andelux supply was really some of the best coal in the country. And many people in your district feel that the monument was created to stop the development of that coal, so we would be forced to import it from outside the United States. And in the rural parts of your district, that's broadly felt.
Yeah.
Is that, if that were the case, is that a misapplication of the monument of the Antiquities Act?
I think regardless of whether that's the case in this specific instance, is still a misapplication of the Antiquities Act. I mean, the Antiquities Act of 1906 was designed to protect primarily archaeological sites, primarily in the Southwest. I mean, small tracts of land, I mean, really tiny tracts compared to the 1.8 million acres or 1.9 million acres of the Grand Escalante. And the reason is because if you're going to create a wilderness or a national forest or a national park, the intent was that you would involve the local people. You would involve the local mayors, the county commissioners, give those folks a chance to have their inputs. You would involve the state officials. You would involve the congressional delegation. And finally, it would be a congressional action. And that reflects the will of the people. And as everyone knows, with the Grand Escalante, President Clinton didn't do that. He said, I'm going to create this of my own will. He circumvented the will of the Congress, the will of the people who live in that part of the state. And I believe it's been to their detriment. I think there's just no question economically that it's had a devastating impact on that part of the state. And all you have to do is visit the folks down there and see that that's obviously the case. Now, there has been some tourism. There's no question that's true. But for heaven's sakes, if you take the economic benefit of this, the small amount of tourism that was created by that, and compare that with this massive resource of energy that has been restricted and can never be accessed now, there's no question economically that this was a far better option for those folks.
And I guess that leads to the second question. Can it be undone enough to, because if I remember correctly, the Andelux coal seam, which is just massive in size, would have required about 40 acres of surface disruption
that's all.
To get to, and about improvements of about 12.5 miles of road.
And doesn't that seem like a reasonable accommodation? It's not like we're going to go strip mine the whole staircase. It's a tiny, tiny footprint. And a couple of comments on that. First, that is clean coal. And if you're worried about emissions, if you're worried about CO2 emissions or pollutants, let's burn clean coal versus dirty coal. And I think from an environmental standpoint, there's a strong argument to be made that this was a resource that should have been used, should have been exploited. And the second thing is, once again, this was beyond the will of the people, and it's hurt those folks down there. And you said, can it be repealed or replaced? I don't know. I would sure hope so, but this is what we can do. In fact, I'm proud to say my very first bill in Congress was to exempt Utah from the Antiquities Act so that this couldn't happen again. So they didn't come in and create another national monument of millions of acres without involving the state and local and congressional officials.
Is there any track record for that ever really happening?
There actually is. Wyoming was exempted in the 1950s. And so they haven't had to worry about, by a presidential fiat, one man coming in and saying, we're going to take, in this case, millions of acres away from state or from the public control and put that under federal control. So yeah, there's a certain precedent for it, and if we could, it will get it out of the House. Now, whether Harry Reid's going to let it go forward in the Senate, that's another issue, which is why, in my opinion, we need a Republican Senate as well.
I'm sure that the people on the other side of the aisle disagree with that.
I'm sure there are, and I hear from those folks, and we appreciate their opinions on that as well.
Are you concerned about monuments popping up between now and the midterms?
Yeah, I am, and I'm not the only one, by the way. And we've had indications from the administration that they're looking at that. I don't think they're going to do it. They've told us that they won't, but on the other hand, the Clinton administration swore up and down to the governor, even to the very day before, that they weren't going to do Grand Escalante as well. So we're hopeful that they won't. They shouldn't, because once again, it circumvents the will of the people.
What kind of impacts do these monuments have on the local communities?
Well, it has enormous impact, and most of it's negative. I got to give a shout out to my chief of staff, Dr. Steed, who has a PhD and a law degree, but his PhD is in public policy, and he's studied and actually has written several books and has testified before Congress on this issue. And I love talking with him because he's so knowledgeable among many other people, but some of the analysis that he and others have done have made it very, very clear that the trade-off between the economic impact of the tourism versus the natural resources is not even close. That there's far greater detrimental effect by locking those resources up. And look, if you're a family who lives in these rural parts of the state, and you have your children, and you'd like for your children to stay around and have an opportunity of working and raising their own families there, and that has nearly been made impossible for these families in these small towns. They almost by definition have to leave. And it's too bad. We lose something when that's the case, when people who love the small towns want to stay in the small towns and can't do that because they just don't have any jobs. But there's another thing that we could do, which I think is a preferred answer, and that is, let's work together on these things. There are certain areas down there that all of us agree, this is true wilderness. This is pristine wilderness. We don't want to touch that. Again, the reason we choose to live in Utah is because we love Utah, and we want to save what's truly unique and beautiful for our children and our grandchildren. But I think we can do it in a way where we take care of protecting those lands, but also recognize there's resources there that we could use that are good nationally. They're good for our national security. They're good for creating jobs for the folks who live there. And I think we'd like to build a model where we bring these stakeholders together, cattlemen and ranchers as well, environmental groups, and see, can't we work together on these? Can't we establish that this is a natural resource, let's use that? This is a wilderness, let's protect that. And I think that's a model that most of us would much rather work through that rather than through a presidential fiat.
Is there anything from your office that can be done to help move along the RS 2477 roads issue, which is so closely tied to that, particularly through that region? The state currently has so many thousands of miles of roads litigating through.
It's a mess, isn't it? I mean, it honestly is, and this is where you begin to realize why people begin to resent the arrogance and the power of the federal government. When you've got areas that people have been accessing for generations, and then someone comes in and says, you can't go there anymore, and this isn't a road, and you say, well, yeah, it's a road, it's clearly a road, we've been using it, and for them to just have the power to declare this is off limits. There's, as you know, the lawsuit that was recently filed and had a good outcome for those who are interested in the RS 2477 issue. I hope that the administration doesn't try to, move around that lawsuit, and we've heard that they may try to condemn that and to maintain so there's no access still. I don't think they're going to do that, and I think we'll maybe make some progress on those issues because of that.
Very good. We're going to take a break here from the county seat. We will be right back. We have several other issues to talk with Congressman Stewart about on the county seat. You'll want to stay tuned for this. We'll be right back.
Along Interstate 70 and Highway 89 is an area that is rich with high mountain peaks, vast forests, lakes, streams, historical sites, and a climate that is perfect for outdoor adventure no matter what the season. Join us in Salina for the 10th anniversary of the Blast from the Past car show, July 26th and 27th. Come see hundreds of classic cars in top condition for a weekend of fun, food, and friendship. In the center of it all, Sevier County. Rediscover your sense of adventure. Welcome to San Juan County. Discover the past. A change of place. Utah's San Juan County, where life is elevated. If you haven't been to Starvation in a while, you're in for a great surprise. New campsites, new cabins, and beach improvements await your next visit. Just 3 hours away, but a world away from the Wasatch Front in Duchesne County. Starvation State Park is located 4 miles northwest of Duchesne, just off US Highway 40. Duchesne County. Close enough for business, far enough to get away.
So, what brings you to town?
What brings anyone to St. George? A couple rounds of golf, a little relaxation.
What, is that all?
Is there more? In a retirement community? Should have stuck with the back nine.
Welcome back to the county seat. Our conversation today with Congressman Stewart from the 2nd Congressional District. You know, we touched on grazing. There's still the issue of forestry that is a big issue, particularly with the condition of the Dixie National Forest, most of which falls within your district. Is there any headway or anything that your office can see that will create some relief or generating some income and protecting the forests, which are right now protecting themselves into extinction, as many people say?
Boy, and when you see some of the fires that were ignited by lightning over the last few days, and you look at some of those parts of the forest, you think if that part of the forest starts on fire, it's going to burn for a long, long time. It's going to be devastating, and it's going to take generations to, for that forest to come back. You know, we have held a number of hearings. Gosh, I'd have to think, but I mean, maybe between 2 different committees I sit on, maybe a half dozen hearings on forest management, contrasting state forest practices, management practices, and federal. And there's a couple things that we know, and that is that many of the states do a much better job than the federal government in managing their forests. And all you have to do, honestly, is drive through parts of Montana, or in some cases parts of Utah, and you can see it. You can see the line where this is state-controlled forest and this is federally controlled forest. And the state-controlled forest is so clearly a much more healthy forest. You know, I used to be the CEO of a small environmental group that we would do environmental training and environmental work, and we tried to, in some cases where the beetle, for example, has devastated forests, and you try to go in and to take out some of that deadwood partial for fire management, but partially because there's a timber resource there. And every time we did that, an environmental group would file suit, knowing that it would take 3 or 4 years for that to work its way through the court, and by that time the wood has no more economic value. And so those who wanted to take advantage of that resource would withdraw their permits. You know, it's a silly way to manage. We shouldn't manage these things through the courts. We should manage them through good forest management practices. Your question was, can we see some progress? I don't know. I mean, I wish I could be optimistic on that, but I'd feel like in some ways I'd be putting on a smiley face. I'm just not sure that the administration views what we consider healthy forest management practices are the same thing as what they consider that same thing.
What is the environment for energy right now in Washington? Is there a shift going on?
There is a little bit of a shift, and I think, and it's a positive shift, but we're going to see with one of the keys, and that's the Keystone Pipeline. Whether the president is going to make what I consider the right decision on that. Look, if you're interested in climate change, if you're interested again in pollutants, then build the Keystone Pipeline, because that oil in Canada is going to find its way to market one way or the other. Here's the choice. It can be refined in India, it could be refined in China, or it could be refined in the United States. And if that's refined in the United States by building the pipeline and refining it here, we have far more stringent environmental controls on our refineries than other parts of the world. And this is a global problem. Those pollutants don't stay in the United States or stay in India. They're obviously a global pollutant. So I think the environmental impact would be much less if we were to build that pipeline. But the second thing is the jobs that it created, 42,000 jobs, billions of dollars of economic activity. All of those things are good things, which is why the State Department and many agencies within the federal government had said to the President, go ahead, build this pipeline. This is a good thing. All the environmental concerns have been mitigated. I'm not sure that he's going to. He kind of indicated early in the spring that he probably would. But then with his announcement 2 weeks ago about climate change and some of his initiatives there, makes me think he's maybe leaning in the other direction. But aside from the administration, within the Congress, there's no question that there's a renewed emphasis on energy. And if I had said to you 5 years ago, we can become North American energy independent, you would have rolled your eyes. You would have said, no, we can't. But the reality is we can, and the reality is that we already are. Fracking and some of these technologies are changing the world. And from a national security point of view, from an economic and a jobs point of view, that is a beautiful thing.
We'll take a pause with that. We will come right back. We'll finish our conversation with Congressman Stewart here on the county seat. Hope you stay with us. I hope you've been taking notes. It's been a pretty good session so far. We'll be right back.
Kanab, base camp for your southern Utah adventures. You belong in Kanab.
You go through the day-to-day repeating what you did yesterday. Don't you wish you could access that piece of your life that's missing? Find the beauty, serenity, family fun, or anything else that's missing from your life in the Cedar City, Bryan Head area. Gain access to your adventure, whether it's camping, hiking, the arts, festivals, or just a getaway. Visit ScenicSouthernUtah.com for details on all the adventures that you can access in scenic Southern Utah.
Sometimes you need to go out in search of adventure. And the place to find it is Marysville, Utah, August 7th through the 10th at the 5th Annual Paiute Trail UTV Jamboree. Come enjoy the adventures of Paiute County, rafting the Sevier River, boating and fishing Otter Creek, or ride horseback through scenery that defines the West, Paiute County, and the UTV Jamboree. Bring your family and discover the magic and beauty of the land where the rainbow ends.
Welcome back to the county seat. Our discussion today has been with Congressman Chris Stewart from the 2nd Congressional District. We took a pause for the commercial break as we were discussing energy. We recently had a chance to talk to former Governor Leavitt, who was Health and Human Services Director, and he made a very interesting comment when we were at the Western Governors Conference. And he said the problem you have with this administration is the ideology is actually ruling over the legislation or their administrative positions.
Yep. Or the science, or any number of things, exactly.
So I thought I would get rolled back into this energy with that statement. Is the ideology and interest and will of the people in this country different than the administration significantly as you can see it right now?
Well, I think it is, and it's particularly in energy. Most Americans, I mean, that shouldn't be a partisan issue, should it? Most Americans want us to be energy independent. It's better, it's more effective, it's cheaper, it creates jobs, there's all these good things. And yet the administration has taken a different view. And, you know, I am the chairman of the subcommittee on the environment, which is a lightning rod of a committee. But, you know, I'm honored to serve in that position. But we have a chance we have direct oversight over EPA, and we have a chance to look at a lot of the science and a lot of the real fundamental foundation of which they're basing their policies. And frankly, many times they're ignoring the science, or they're trying to create their own science in order to reinforce what they want to do politically, or to reinforce their own policies that are already predetermined. And let me give you an example of that, if I could. EPA has for years now tried to link fracking with pollutants on groundwater. And so far they're 0 for 4 in areas that they've said, look at this, this is a devastating example of groundwater being contaminated with fracking. And in 4 of these instances, all 4 of them now, they've had to back off and say, well, maybe that's not exactly the case. And yet they're still continuing to try and find that. And once again, you and I want to drink clean water. We don't want to have to worry about whether our children are going to have clean water. That's a very reasonable expectation. But the EPA very clearly is on a witch hunt to try and find some example where they could shut down fracking. And it just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, fracking's been around for a long time, by the way. Now, we're getting a lot better at it, but the basic procedures have been around for 20 or 25 years. There's no precedent there that this is dangerous for us as long as we're careful and it's regulated, and the states do a good job of regulating it. And the states have done a great job of regulating it. So why would you take the position that we need to go find a reason to stop fracking? It just doesn't make any sense.
Well, the governors of the western states just issued a couple of weeks ago an energy policy from the Western Governors Conference that basically says let the states handle energy development, have the federal government just come along because we've got a handle on it. Is there something that from a congressional level you could do to help foster that thinking?
Well, if we can remove the federal government's influence at any point along the process, I think that's a good thing. And the state regulators, the state environmental quality and other agencies have done a terrific job of regulating these industries, having a great outcome, protecting our water, protecting our air, at the same time allowing businesses to grow and to thrive and to do the things we want them to do. And the federal government comes along and throws their heavy hand into these many times. They overcome or overtake the state regulators and the state agencies, and there's just no need for that. So if you ask me what we could do, what I'd like to do is, as much as possible, remove the federal government from those heavy-handed controls. Let the states, who we all trust, and have done shown that they're capable of doing it and doing it effectively, let them have the authority to do that. And I think it leads to a much better outcome, really, for everyone, including those who, like we are, who are interested in protecting the environment.
We've covered a lot of issues. We've had a good platform for you to discuss where your office stands on things. But I do have to ask you a question.
Okay.
Okay.
Hard one coming.
On the B1B, you're well over, you're into the Machs.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. What's it like to fly that fast around
the
world?
Man. The B1 flying, I mean, I'd be up flying and I'd go, I can't believe they pay me to do this. I would do this for free. Heavens, I mean, we would fly the B1 at 1,000 feet per second is how fast we're going. A couple hundred feet off the ground, through the mountains out here in the Utah Test and Training Range, and we do that at night. Now that was a lot of fun.
Well, or either that or frightening. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us today on The County Seat. Thank you for watching. If you would like more information, go to our website, thecountyseat.tv. We invite you to join us in our conversation on our Facebook page, and we will look for you next week on The County Seat. Thank you.